Our next presenter is Julie Rosier. Julie is a digital archivist who will receive her master's in information science with a focus in archives and records management from the University of Albany, SUNY in May 2023. This semester, she is interning with the Digital Projects and Archives Librarian at Middlebury College, as well as with the archivist at the Northfield Mount Herman School. She was recently selected as a DLF Forum Fellow, where she will speak later this month about a project she initiated to preserve 5 decades of historical newspapers at her local public library. Before her recent pivot into the library field, Julie worked in higher education administration, including roles such as the producer at the Juilliard School and the associate director of the UMass Labor Center. She is a strong believer in the power of stories, and in 2004 founded an arts and social justice organization called Red Thread Commons. This organization seeks to document history from the ground up by amplifying the stories of citizen artists, we can't all be archivists, on community stages. Today, she will describe a digital collection that she created to preserve the records of Red Thread's activities and productions.
Thank you. All right, get set up here. Okay, let's take this off. So, as you just heard, my name is Julie Rosier, and I'm an archives graduate student. I live in Western Mass and attend school remotely at the University at Albany, SUNY. I started this program 20 years after graduating from the University of Michigan with a degree in history and Spanish. I am pictured here attending my graduate school orientation back in January 2021 over Zoom. I was born in 1980, so though technically I belong to the tail end of Generation X, my lived experience has felt more like that of a millennial than a Gen Xer. When I was 28, I lived for a year with Grace Lee Boggs, a Detroit-based labor and Black Power activist. Sorry, I'm going to scroll. Who was 93 at the time. The year was 2008, and something called social media and Web 2.0 was sweeping the nation. I wrote an article at the time about how the early success of the Obama presidential campaign had filled me with a sense of purpose and inspiration. Grace asked if she could publish my article for her standing weekly column at a local paper called the Michigan Citizen. I gave my enthusiastic permission, and she proceeded to write a little bio for me that read, Julie Rosier, a member of the millennial generation, is spending this year at the Boggs Center, where she conducts writing workshops and has created the Boggs blog. So just like that, I became an official millennial. Fast forward about 14 years and 3 American presidents later, this summer, I was taking a 6-week graduate course on digital public libraries. The professor gave us the task of creating a free hosted Omeka site to house a digital repository of our choosing. He told us to select a topic that could hold our interest. Through the duration of the project, it needed to be content that we were comfortable having online and could also be shaped into a digital exhibit. The only example I had seen of a past project was from a recent graduate of the program who had created a digital archive of the most beautiful owl figurines that she had collected from all over the world. Unfortunately, I didn't have any owls to share. But I did have born digital records from a company that I founded back in my mid-20s called Red Thread Commons. So I decided to create a digital archive to preserve the records of RTC's activities and productions since its founding in 2004. Why red thread? A Chinese proverb states that an invisible red thread of destiny connects us all. It is said that though it may stretch or tangle, this thread will never break. Drawing upon the mythology of that essential connecting principle then, Red Thread Commons is a performing arts and popular education organization that seeks to document history from the ground up by amplifying the stories of citizen artists on community stages. For the main stage productions, small performance ensembles create theater out of lived experience, weaving autobiographical material into collectively created productions. In a program called Study and Story, participants gather for a series of peer-facilitated learning experiences that examine topics like race, class, gender, and sexuality, and then use their exploration of how those intersecting power structures shape their lives and then they use that as a prompt for personal writing. Pictured here, you will see an audition postcard from the first main stage production, which I produced while living in Detroit in 2008. Once I chose a theme for my project, I ran into a few preservation challenges with this unique collection. As both donor and processing archivist, I had to face the organizational system of my own personal computer to go hunting for gold. I began to form some informal appraisal criteria. The assignment asks for a minimum of 40 digital items, and I was looking to document about 18 years of the company's existence. So I tried to capture significant milestones throughout the years, creating something of a retrospective of the work instead of drilling down into a more detailed representation of one production or event. Working with digital photographs, I had to resize images to conform to the site's storage capacity limits, normalize file names to fit my own organizational schema, and generate a spreadsheet where I could start to accumulate some metadata to prepare for ingest. Even though there was no way to bulk upload with my free version of Omeka, I still appreciated having all of my metadata in a spreadsheet for ease of access and editing. Once I had decided which records to preserve, I had to think about arrangement and how to use Omeka's categorization tools, such as collections and tags and subject headings, to mimic the hierarchical structures that containers such as folders and boxes provide for analog collections. I generated 5 collections: production photos, study and writing groups, event photos, promotional materials, and ensemble practice. Then I used tags to group by program type, location, and years across the various collection. For example, you would find the top 2 photos on the right in the production photos collection, whereas the bottom 2 could be found in the study and writing group collection. Omeka uses the 15 core elements of Dublin Core for their metadata fields. I use Library of Congress subject headings, and you can see a sampling of some of the terms that I found to describe this work listed on the slide. I struggled a little bit with the creator field and then ended up going with standardizing and naming Red Thread Commons as the creator, even though the photos were taken from a variety of people, often unknown. That might be something I would go back and change if I had more time. Finally, when describing performing arts documentation, you always have the challenge of what the photo is about and what the artwork being performed is about. So I tended to stick with just what is happening in the photo and not give a whole lot of context about the story. Once I had all of my items uploaded and the metadata fields completed, the exhibit tool offered a chance to display the still images in a way that allowed for more storytelling. This way, I could make a storyboard of sorts where I could use the captions to describe the discrete creative stages of the red thread process. The gallery pictured shows the beginning of the process of interweaving stories, then a picture of citizen artists memorizing lines. Next, the performers get up on their feet and through a rehearsal bring the scenes to life. And the final picture on the right shows an ensemble in New York City getting notes from their director, which happens to be me. In terms of access, all of those items are publicly available on the internet. But I did encounter an ethical challenge in that I have signed media release statements from most of the Red Thread participants, but I don't have the same informed consent documentation that I would necessarily have in an oral history project. In addition, often Red Thread stories that citizen artists choose to share are connected to trauma and sensitive in nature. So I made the decision to not directly name any participants in the metadata or description so that a search of their name on the internet would not retrieve these records. So, what makes this collection important and how does it fit into larger conversations? In their recent article proposing the use of radical empathy in the archives, Caswell and Saifor, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, argue that archivists should see themselves as caregivers, bound to records creators, subjects, users, and communities through a web of mutual affective responsibility. Red Thread Commons was also built on feminist principles. It was guided especially by women of color feminists like Audre Lorde, Gloria Anzaldúa, and Chela Sandoval, who weaved history, performance, scholarship, mythology, and autobiography together, declaring boldly that the personal is political. Red Thread seeks to reveal that web of mutual responsibility and care, insisting that every person's story has value and deserves to be received with care by a community of witnesses. I hope that the fact that someone took the time and attention to preserve these records and make them accessible on the web might empower future generations of grassroots innovators in the field of performing arts, education, and archives. By deciding to create a digital repository out of these records, I was asserting that the activities of Red Thread Commons had enough intrinsic value to merit archival preservation. Given that it's a grassroots organization that lacks both institutional clout and cultural prestige, not everyone might agree with this premise. Its inclusive, do-it-yourself aesthetic shares a similar vibe to zine culture or projects like Wikipedia, but it pushes up against more traditional forms of performance and scholarship. But I decided to face those risks head-on in order to publicly affirm that Red Thread Commons existed, that creators of the millennial generation made contributions as young people to the historical record, that peer-facilitated radical learning spaces exist outside of academia, and that personal stories matter. And that, my friends, is what ultimately led me here today to this professional and academic environment, no less, to talk about creating the Red Thread Commons Digital Archive. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I am truly honored to be here today. Feel free to be in touch. I've listed my email, LinkedIn, and Twitter contacts here. Also, you could take a picture of this if you'd like for links to the digital archive or for the Google Slides here. And just one final reminder that I will be graduating and entering a job market near you in May. So don't hesitate to ask me for a business card or resume if you'd like one. Thank you so much.